Welcome back, and this is the second video in our Rollerball series, and we're going to get the game started here. So hopefully you can click on your Unity icon, and it might bring up something like this. It might be a little bit different because it's your first time opening it. I've got some of the games that I've worked on before here, but the big thing is we're going to create a new project. So whatever yours looks like, we're going to make sure we click on New here, and you should get this window here. And you've got a choice of where to save it. We'll talk about that in a second, and 3D and so on. So first thing, let's name our game here. I'm going to call it Rollerball. And for you, obviously, we don't want to be saving it on our C drive. We want to save it on our H drive. Now I'm on my computer at home. There is no H drive. So I'm going to save it onto my desktop just to make my life easier. But I highly suggest that you put it on your H drive there. So this should be on your H drive. Create a new folder. Again, I mean, you could call it Unity, whatever you'd like to call it. Unity, I'm going to call mine Unity Rollerball RB. And I'm going to select that folder. So it should sort of show here on yours, H drive, probably your username, and then some sort of name there. Sorry about that, just a car alarm at 5:30 in the morning. So that's, yeah. Then once everything's set up there, and just make sure you're on the 3D template. Now there is a 3D with extras. I've never used that before. But there's sort of the difference between 3D and 2D there. We're going to make a 3D game. Okay, so we'll just keep that and hit create project. Now it might take a second here. It will actually sort of close down and then open it up. And as you create a new game, you always want to make sure that you create a new folder, just like we've done there, and make sure you've always saved it to your H drive. It's especially important here because we're going to be doing this for a few days, probably almost a month here, right? And you don't want to lose anything. So I'll just pause it here while we bring it in, and we'll come back. So now that I'm back, I've got my Unity scene all loaded up here and ready to go. Now, obviously, like I said before in the introduction, it's a little complex at the start, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what's going on here. So you've got two main windows, and now, if yours doesn't look like that, let me just show you how I got mine to look like that. There's a layout button over here, and I usually go by the 2x3, so I'm going to just click on that, and it sets it up like this. Because our game is going to be relatively simple, there's not too many assets that are going to go into our hierarchy here. So just looking at the hierarchy one, I'm going to click on this tab and drag it down, and I'm just going to throw it in here. Okay, and that just makes this window a little bit bigger. Now, again, that's just the 2x3. You can change your layouts, okay, depending on what you enjoy there. Typically 2x3 with the hierarchy pulled down here. If it messes up, just click back on there and then drag that down. So up here is the scene window, and if you've never worked in 3D, this is where we're going to sort of be able to manipulate the objects, select objects, and do things like that. Now, in the window below, that's the game window. So this is just a preview of your game, and if you go into play mode, you'll be able to play it in this window. Okay, on the far right here in these right sections, the project, this is all our assets, everything that is included in our game. This here is the stuff that we're being used in the scene. So your scene, you can kind of think of it as a level. So you might have assets that are not used in a particular scene. So that's where sort of the difference comes in. This is really sort of what's saved in your game folder, okay, on your desktop or on your H drive. This is what's in this scene, okay? And we'll start to see over here in a few minutes what's in the inspector. That's going to be what are called the components that make up our game objects, okay? And the game objects are obviously things that are in our game. So first thing, you know, we've got a name here of our scene, and it's called sample scene. Not a great name. So let's go ahead and change that. And also, you'll see it up here as well. Multiple ways of doing it. Probably the easiest thing to do here is just go sort of save scene. It's going to save it as the sample scene. So I'm going to save the scene as, just to change its name up. And already You can see here, this is in my desktop, so it should be on your H drive. The folder I made, the game I made, and in the assets folder, we have something called scenes. So I'm just going to save this scene as, let's call it game, something really original. Okay, you can save it whatever you want to call it, but now it's called the game. Okay, and this might change later on because you might have like level 1, level 2, if you create an extra level, whatever it is. And then the scenes, like I was mentioning, are, you can think of them as levels, but they don't necessarily have to be levels. You might have your game over scene. You might have your, start scene, whatever it is. They're just basically different parts of your game, different sections of your game. All right, so enough talking about that. Let's get something into our game, because at the moment, we've got a camera, which is from where we can see here, and a light, and then this huge vast plane, I shouldn't say plane, but this huge vast grid that represents our world, but we have nothing really in our world. So to add things, there's a variety of ways to do it, just like most programs. Let's just come up to here to start with, and we're going to click on this menu here, drop down menu, and we're going to create an object. And because we're working in 3D, we probably want to include a 3D object. Although what we're going to create here is 2D to start with. We're just going to add a plane to our world. And so if I click on that, a plane comes in. And so this is just a two-dimensional plane. And if I look over here now in the inspector with it selected, there's a variety of components. And we'll talk about these in a minute. Now, it obviously defaults to its name as plane. Probably not the best name for it. So I'm going to just come right up into here. And it's going to be our ground. Just type it in. You can see it changes down here in a hierarchy. And so our hierarchy is what is in our game at the moment. Okay. And so we've got three things: the camera, the light, and the ground. Okay. That we've just put in. Now on here, on the components for the ground in the inspector, there's a few things here, and I'm not going to talk about all of them right at the moment, but just two. Transform is its position, its rotation, and its scale, so where it is in the game. If yours is not at 0, 0, 0 in its position, which is sort of the origin of the world, there's a little gear icon on the very far right, and you can always reset the position. Since mine's 0, 0, 0, it's not letting me do that. But if yours isn't, you can reset the position there. And that should just take it back to 0, 0, 0. We're not going to rotate it at the moment, so we've got it flat on the ground. We are going to play with the scale a bit. So I'm going to take this scale here. And you can see on this little icon, there's an X and Z represent sort of the flat ground. Y is the vertical, and that represents the height. So we're going to keep this flat on the ground. So we're not going to make it thicker or whatever in terms of its height. We're just going to manipulate the X and Z scale. So I'm just going to pop over here, make that 2. So you can see that it's gotten wider. I'm just pressing tab to move across, and press 2 again. And there we are. It's just creating this plane. Okay. So that's pretty good. The other thing here that I'll just mention for the moment is that we have a mesh collider. And so Unity is really a physics engine. And that means, it reacts, it simulates real world things. And so most objects that you could run into, things that have, occupy space and have volume, you can collide or run into them. And so by default, a mesh collider is on there, which means that if I put an object on there, it will block it, or if it runs into it, it will block it. And that's going to be very important because we're going to put our ball, our rollerball, on there, and we want it to be able to sort of fall with gravity to the ground and sit on this plane. All right, so got our plane in there. Next, we're going to add a ball. So to add the player, again, we could come back up here to Game Object, add, and we're going to add a sphere, just to show you a different way of doing it if you're interested. Under Create here, in the game, we can create a 3D object, and there is the sphere again. So either way works fine. So I'm just going to add that sphere in, and it's sitting right there. Just if yours isn't again, make sure you set the transform, reset that transform or position, reset position there. Okay, again, sphere comes in as its default name. I'm going to call this one player because it's going to be our player. And you'll notice here now it still has the transform just like before. It also has a sphere collider because now it's not a ground, right? It doesn't have a mesh collider. It's got this sphere collider. If you want to zoom in on it, okay, we haven't talked about navigating the 3D window yet. You can obviously scroll in or scroll out. So I'm using the middle mouse scroll button and I'm able to move in and out. Now, another thing you can do is if you have that selected, if I press F on the keyboard, it will focus in on it. It says frame, but I like to think of it as F as focus. So if you ever lose something or you need to move around, just select it in here, which you can find, and then just move your mouse up here and press F, and it should zoom in on that. Now, as you can see, the ball is sort of halfway through the ground, and so we need to move it up. Now, to move things, again, we could come over here to the position, and that's how it will do, but you could also obviously use these little transform widgets. So I can pull it up, and as you can see, it's moving above, right, or below, and we want it just sitting on the ground. Now, if I look at that, that's pretty well on the ground. A little hard to tell. Just from experience, I know this ball is a 1 unit in its, I guess, diameter. And so if we move it up half, it's going to be halfway above. So I can actually just come onto the y-axis, which we talked about being vertical, and I'm going to put 0.5, and now it's just sitting right on the ground there. Not a big deal if it was a little bit above, because it's going to have gravity on it a little bit later, so that it will actually just fall to the ground if it was a little bit above. Okay, now we'll end this video here. When we come back, we'll put some colors to our world. We'll play with the lighting a little bit, and hopefully we can maybe even start some coding there. All right, so we'll end this here, and we'll see you in the next video.